we have the amazing Jinku and Ukweli from EA Wave, who, as I just said, are basically representing the rest of Africa today. So we have a South African and two Kenyans, so we'll see what we can do. Right, so shall we get started? Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Jinku. Pleasure to meet you all.
Hi, my name's Ukweli. I'm part of a musical collective called East African Wave with him, and we have 4 other members. So, from Kenya.
Excellent. So I was asking the girls earlier, how did they get started in the world of music? Because it's not always an easy one.
I think we got started primarily, I guess, through SoundCloud. Started making music, and I started posting some of my beats. And I met now a community of other people who are making like electronic music in Kenya through SoundCloud. So we just started messaging each other back and forth. And yeah, I started off on FL Studio, then migrated to Logic. Yeah, that's how I started.
Yeah, same thing. Like the SoundCloud generation is made such a huge impact, especially in the Kenyan scene, because there was a lot of gatekeepers and there was no avenue for alternative music. So we ended up just posting our music online, and through that we found a whole community, and SoundCloud actually propelled and spiraled the scene that we have right now in the country. And yeah, I guess that's how we all started.
So what did your parents say when you said, hey, I'm going to be a musician?
I still think they are 50-50 to this till today, but at least they're seeing that I'm able to travel, play shows, and do those things. So they're like, I would never have imagined a desk job giving you those type of opportunities. So at least they're more lenient now, but they're just like, when are you going to get a real job? And I'm like, I don't know.
My mom's always been like artsy. She's a manager, but at the same time she's also like does part-time interior design. So she's been super supportive, but it's always been like school first. This is like a hobby to her. So yeah, so it's I guess she still thinks it's a hobby. So it's I guess maybe hopefully soon enough she'll kind of get warm to the idea.
No, the reason I ask is because that's the one thing I noticed, a big difference between growing up and living in South Africa and moving to the UK, and in particular moving to Sweden, is here saying to your mom and dad, hey, I'm going to be a producer. They don't look at you like you've gone mad. They're like, okay, cool, which school are you going to go to? So it's always really interesting to see how in other parts of the world it isn't necessarily the same approach.
Yeah, like especially I think in Africa, it's or in Kenya specifically, it's still the old school way of thinking, like, be a lawyer, engineer, doctor. That's that's the way to go. Like music and arts are seen more as a hobby or talent that you could have, but like I think pursuing it like as a career or like as a actual choice isn't really like looked at as like a good idea, because like there's the whole idea of a struggling artist, which is like you struggle a lot with your art in Africa, like, or in Kenya, because the government and just in general, like there's no proper scene where you have labels and you have managers and you have all this like systems in place. We don't really have a lot of that, so it's still very in its infancy at this point. Yeah.
And also like the after school programs such as music and arts were cancelled out, so like we have no programs that way. So there is a very DIY approach to where we're from. So like we learned a lot of what we do through the internet. And also like finding mentors to mentor us was also quite a challenge. Like there is this band, Just a Band, with Blinky Bill, and that was one of the people who really took us in and supported us a lot. And that has at least given us a bit of a place in the society right now.
Awesome. So how did the collective come about?
SoundCloud.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a theme here.
Yeah, everything SoundCloud. So he was working on an album for an artist called Karun at this studio called Motion in Sound, MIS, and I was interning for the UN at the time. So he sent me a couple of beats, and he was like, "Do you think you could remix this?" So I made the remix. The label didn't like it because it was like super experimental, but we kept it in contact. Then through like different parties and just hang around with the same friends, we all eventually, like the other 4 members, all eventually just met at a party. We met here and there. So I think the actual time we really actually came together was I think we called
Jojo Abbott.
yeah, Jojo Abbott, a singer from Ghana, came down, and she wanted us to like make some music with her. So I called all the other producer friends that I knew, which was Jinku, New Funk, Miro, Hiribai, and who else? And
She wasn't there yet.
And Stu was, yeah. So we met in the studio and we made a couple of songs that were supposed to be like an album, and that's how eventually we just decided to make a collective, because we didn't really know any other producers at that time, so we were the only people we knew. So we decided to just form like a little collective of ourselves to help each other out.
And do you think that's quite a successful grouping of people? Because as you were saying earlier, you don't have a lot of the maybe traditional music structures. So do you think this is the way that you guys have really successfully developed?
Do you want to have a listen?
Yes, absolutely. There's always a cable problem.
Oh my God. Damn. Please stop looking on my ass, please.
And he's using SoundCloud to stream this, by the way.
Hey, hashtag. Oh, damn. It's disabled. Network is disabled. Network errors, sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, pardon. Okay. No.
He comes all the way to Sweden for bad internet.
Actually, a side note, Nairobi is actually one of the top 10 countries in the world to have good internet, so we're not doing that badly.
And do you think that's helped fueled people using the internet? Because they've got such great access to it. Maybe whereas other parts of Africa, they don't have. So maybe you guys are ahead of the game.
Yeah, because Nairobi has really good internet. So like streaming and like going on YouTube and learning stuff is super easy. It's a lot easier to do than using other methods. So like for us, like YouTube has been like the lifeline of like learning anything that you need to know, like, because that's how I learned how to use FL Studio. That's how I learned how to use Logic. That's how I learned how to mix, how to master, like all that I learned on YouTube. So I think I have this song he was referencing. This is the first song we actually made together as a collective.
What's it called?
It's called Mega Pen now. It's a Ghanaian. It's a Ghanaian word which means let it shame you not. So I don't understand any of what she was singing because we're from Kenya, but it's a language called, what's it called? Ewe. It's called Ewe.
Yeah, and it was a flip of Missy Elliott's song. So it's the Wicked song, but then now she translated it into Ghanaian.
Is it worth it? Let me work it. Is it worth it? Let me work it. Is it worth it? Let me work it. Is it worth it? Let me work. Let me work. Let me work it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. And reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse. Put my thing down, flip it and reverse. And reverse. I'd like to get to know you so I can show ya. Put the pussy on you like I told ya. Give me all your numbers so I can phone ya. You're gonna like to stink, then call me over. Not on the bed, lay me on the sofa. Phone before you come, I need to shave my chocha. Save my chocha. I need to save my chocha. You can kind of G when I'm near my way now. Touch me where I peak, darling, make it better now.
You can see all the producers are sitting up the front. It's like, yeah, So this being your first release, there's a lot of influences and very different styles in there. Like, what do you all bring to the collective?
So I think that's like, okay, so those are 5 producers who worked on that track. That was 2 years ago.
How does
So
it actually work out in real life? 5 producers?
it's a bit chaotic, but essentially what usually happens is we all have different skill sets. So like some of us are better on keys, some of us are better on drums. So this song started with keys. So like whoever starts and finds some nice chords, plays the chords, and somebody else jumps in, puts the drums and.
Yeah, so it's basically like we just jump in, like someone starts at an idea, then you're like, okay, I can fit to that idea. Then someone's like, oh yeah, I have another idea. So it's just like musical chairs until we tune everything till it sounds good.
Yeah, and it really works well because like this was 2 years ago, so like we didn't really know much about like music theory or what's wrong and right. So like especially when there's no egos or you don't really have that much information, it's really easy to work with people because like you don't feel that you have more information or you're more knowledgeable than the next person next to you. So it was really easy to just work with each other like that.
And you were saying you were working with a Ghanaian artist. How did that come about? And it's really interesting you were saying like we did the track but we have no idea what she's saying.
That came about, there's a festival called Africa Nouveau Festival, which she flew in for. And while she was there, another singer called Karun linked us up, and she was like, you should really work with her. So after the festival was over, she left and came back now specifically to work with us. So I think we ended up staying with her.
Was it like a 1-2 month residency?
Yeah, so she came and we did a bunch of parties with her. Shows and stuff. So like over the course of 2 months, we recorded like probably like 50, 60 songs, like a lot of songs, while also like playing the songs live. So we'd record a couple of songs during the week and throw a party and just showcase some of the music that we'd been working on for 2 months. Yeah.
I mean, this is something that's particularly African. You don't necessarily see elsewhere. The music is so associated with the lifestyle and the party. It's like, yeah, we did a couple parties. It was great. And when I get sent bios from all the different people from all over the world who attend our songwriting camps, you can see so much about what's important in those countries based on what they focus on in their bios. And Africa in particular, it's all about the live music. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think essentially like music. That's why electronic music's really hard to like break in Africa because like people still have the idea that like if it's music, it has to be guitar, piano, like the traditional format of like what music is. So especially for live music now, with what we were doing, a lot of people hadn't heard like 808s on a live show and stuff like that. Like people actually playing on drum pads and stuff like that. So live is very essential because it makes it kind of like people like dancing, people like shows. So that's really like dance is a big part of like the African scene. So like for you to be able to play your music and for people to be able to connect with it, they need to feel like the groove, the rhythm to it. Yeah.
And like a side note, like what we are now is we're like the first electronic live band in Nairobi currently, and it's been a challenge to like get people to really understand that electronic music can also be performed live. So it's quite interesting territory we're in right now.
Absolutely. I think dancing is one of those wonderful aspects of music appreciation you see all over Africa that I don't think is a country-specific thing. And it'd be interesting to see how in different countries electronic music connects differently with people. Because, for example, in South Africa, it's quite a different country to Kenya. It's developed in various different ways, and they've got a very healthy electronic scene with loads and loads of clubs. But I suppose it's more kind of European or American in that sense. So do you see more kind of electronic clubs being established in Nairobi?
The electronic scene in Kenya is small, but it's vibrant. There's just a few companies that do electronic music events. But the audience that it connects to is like it's a niche audience, but they are very faithful to it. So like there are a lot of shows that happen throughout the year where there's a lot of electronic music, deep house, a lot of house music. So traditionally, like, if you talk about electronic music in Kenya, people think house music, not, any other types of music. That's why for us, we really fuse a bunch of genres together. So it's been a bit harder for us to break in. But like, talk about house music is super popular, I think, basically throughout Africa. Even in South Africa, like house music, deep house music is super big.
So what is the Kenyan music scene like?
Let's see, how would I put it? So basically in Nairobi, we have different areas. So like, let's say in the Westlands area, Kilimani, that's towards the west, that's more house music influenced. And then you have the east side, that's more dancehall and reggae. Then you have the south, where it's more like traditional kind of music, and in the north it's more like Arabic influenced because of like the Muslim religion and Arabic speaking people. So like each of those areas have a whole different scene.
So do you have any Kenyan superstars? What's your chart? What do the charts look like?
A lot of there's this big band called Sauti Sol. So I think they're the biggest band out of Kenya, so they're pretty big because they, when they drop a song, it's going to be on the top charts, like in Africa, at least on Apple Music and stuff like that. It's a lot of Afrobeat, like on the charts. That's really what's predominant on the scene. It's Afropop, Afrobeats. Yeah.
What is Afropop and Afrobeat? Because I can guarantee that's a very African terminology.
So there is Afrobeat, then there is Afrobeats. So Afrobeat is like a Fela Kuti, basically Femi Kuti. Then Afrobeats, the people you listen to now, like Wizkid, for example, that's Afrobeat. Tiwa Savage, Davido. So those are the people. The Nigerian pop music right now is Afrobeat. Yeah. One Dance, everybody knows One Dance by Drake. Yeah, that's Afrobeat. Yeah.
So a lot of music now takes. A lot of pop music now kind of has, they've gotten the sound from Afrobeat, because Afrobeat it's essentially like there's a big singer called Fela Kuti. He died, but like he's probably has the biggest influence all over African music. He found a way to combine African rhythms, which is like on different drums. There's a bunch of instruments and flutes and drums, and found a way to combine that with jazz and blues music. So even Afrobeats have its own different scales, like its own different sounds and instruments. But now the more modern version of that is now what you hear with people like Wizkid, what you hear with people like Wale. Like a lot of on Wale's new album, a lot of it had Afrobeats. One Dance was partly produced by an African producer called DJ Maforisa. So when you hear that kind of dancehall-y / African vibe to it, it's because Afrobeat is very similar to dancehall in its drum grooves, but it has a different flavor. I wouldn't know exactly how to like pinpoint it, but you'll hear a lot of it coming very soon, because like Drake has been working with a lot of like African singers and African producers, so I'm sure his next album will be like the world's introduction to Afrobeats.
And do you think I find that quite exciting, but as musicians and DJs and producers who've been doing this a long time, do you think it's a bit frustrating to see someone like Drake break African music?
Yeah, it's... But I love Drake, first of all. Like, I'm a big fan of Drake, so I don't mind when that happens. It's just that the only problem is that it's never categorized as what it is. Like, it'll be categorized as tropical house or, or dancehall. At the very best, they'll probably say it's dancehall. But so, like, if I go on Apple Music, I can't really... The genre, like, even when our musicians release music on Apple Music, like Wizkid, Davido, or Sauti Sol, it's never categorized as Afrobeats because they don't have an Afrobeats genre like column. So like it's categorized as hip hop or rap or R&B.
Or world music.
Or world music, which I hate that term. I really hate it. Like it's annoying because it's like, why? So there's all these genres, then it's like, okay, world music is all you other people we don't know. So it's really frustrating, but I think Drake has always managed to
Be at the cutting edge, like you breaking artists, breaking scenes,
Yeah.
and I think we commend him because like not many other artists were. Am I allowed to curse? Okay, were not really fucking with African music. Until until he became a Billboard Top 100, so many hits. Then everybody was like, Wizkid. Everybody was like, oh, Nigeria is now the next mecca for mining music. And if you now listen to like about three of the top 40 hits since One Dance all have that Afrobeat rhythm.
Yeah, it's just that people don't know it as Afrobeat. They just think it's like dancehall or like a revised edition of dancehall. But I think what's really important with what Drake's done is that he's featured artists and he's made people aware that this is so and so, because he works with a lot of other African acts, and I'm sure it's going to be on his new album. So like even with One Dance, it really lifted Wizkid's career. Wizkid's a very big Nigerian musician, and now he's
Black
playing.
Coffee
Yeah,
also.
and Black Coffee also. Yeah. Black Coffee was featured on the album. So like all now, Black Coffee is playing Coachella. Wizkid's playing Coachella. Wizkid won a Mobile Award, which is a pretty big British award. So like a lot of this African musicians are starting to get recognized. And even when Wizkid played a couple of shows in Europe, like people were
he
singing
sold
word
out-
for
he
word
sold
his
out
songs.
Albert
Yeah,
Hall.
yeah, he sold out a pretty big show in the UK. So I think it's coming slowly. That I just hope that people eventually, the people at Apple would be able to like make a category for Afrobeat.
So
like,
we need-
possibly.
We did have someone
Anyone?
from Apple in the audience. Don't worry, we can get a little petition going at the end of the day. On your way, people. Just sign it on your way out. So the scene is very broad and very interesting, and it's developing. And now we've got a lot more international artists maybe appropriating some of those sounds. But locally, like, how do you guys listen to music? I mean, you mentioned Apple Music, but do you guys? I know not all over Africa. Apple Music or iTunes. I mean, Spotify is only launching in South Africa in February. So, where do you guys listen to your music?
YouTube actually, you can find a lot on YouTube. Also SoundCloud, but I think it's mainly YouTube. Yeah, you can find almost every song on YouTube.
Yeah, it's possible for you to listen. Like I have an Apple Music account. I can listen to Apple Music, but the only thing that you run into, especially with YouTube and a lot of these platforms, is that some music is locked to regions. So some music on YouTube I can't listen to because they tell me it's not available in my region, and there's no other. All the platforms do that, and I've never understood why people lock their music to certain regions and stuff. So I think even Spotify is not. We don't have Spotify in Kenya. And you're saying like Spotify just is recently coming to South Africa, so a lot of music is on SoundCloud, and people bootleg the music and put it up on SoundCloud and gets taken down and so on and so forth. But which is why bootlegging in Africa, which is like illegally downloading music, is so big, because a lot of these platforms you don't have access to listen to the music, even if you want to pay for it. Even if I wanted to pay like for Spotify, I can't listen to the music. I just simply can't. So, but slowly and hopefully like very soon, a lot of these platforms will start opening up first for like Spotify comes to South Africa. Hopefully it'll come to Kenya pretty soon. So, but for the meantime, SoundCloud is king.
Don't worry, I'm lobbying Spotify and YouTube every opportunity I get. So do people make playlists on YouTube, and are they listening to them on their phones or their computers? Like, how do you guys interact with this digital music?
SoundCloud playlist, YouTube playlist, iTunes playlist, phone playlists. Like the way music is shared a lot is through phones personally. Like a lot of people have music on their phones, and that's how they share links, and also through Facebook. Actually, we have specialized groups for like music lovers, and that's where we just share links and everything like that. So yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, so a lot of different and Apple playlists have become pretty popular, especially like on Twitter, like a lot of people share their like playlists that they made on Apple Music on Twitter. So like that's where a lot of my music comes from. Is like people just make a, and you can keep updating it as new music comes out. And I think there are also a lot of like platforms that are specific to Africa. That MP3 sites where people download music that's made in Africa. A lot of African music is offered for free on those type of sites. Even there's traditionally like hip hop sites like Dat Piff and you know, mixtape sites. So that's really popular there because that's the type of music that people listen to. Like it's more underground music, like music that's going to blow up pretty soon, but not yet. Yeah.
And do you use things like Mdundo? Because that's very Kenya specific. That's
No.
developed.
The only reason why I don't like Mdundo is because the bit rate that you receive the music is too low, 128. So there's no reason why you don't want to play something with that low quality.
But we're producers, so like
I was gonna say, you are producers.
That's what I'm saying. We're producers. The general listener doesn't really care that you're downloading it at like 128 kbps or like whatever. But
It's so painful.
it's painful to like the producers, but like people really don't care because they're listening to it on, you know, like their like really shitty Android speakerphone, you know. So it's like they
Because
don't
it's
really,
Apple
they can't
person.
tell the difference. So
This is my biggest argument with when a track goes to get mixed for the 15th time and it's mastered 4 times. I'm like, yeah, but it's going to be listened on awful headphones while someone's on a bus. Do we really need to go to that kind of extent? But I know that people who do appreciate
trust
that sound.
me, when you hear a bad mastered song or a low bit rate on a good sound system, like you'll know, because like there is like, as a DJ personally, you can tell like the energy of a room. So I feel like you're playing based on energies, and when you have a lower bit rate, that's frequencies that have been cancelled out. Yeah, so you can actually see the reaction in people. Like when someone is dancing because it's so good, then you play a low mastered song, you just see their movements slow down, then they start looking at you. So trust me, if it's not heard, it's felt.
yeah, it only matters to DJs because we play it on proper systems. No, I understand why consumers don't care about it because they can't tell the difference on like really bad systems, which is where most of your music is listened to, like bad earphones, bad speakers, bad, like, you know what I mean? So it's like it really matters on live shows and, you know, when you have a nice system. But other than that, like people can't really tell the difference, which is sad. So it's, I guess
Except
it's up
Jinku,
to us.
who can always tell the difference.
But it's up to us to educate like people, or like just people who aren't that deeply into music, on why, you know, like you download it at 320 kbps or something like that. Like why WAV matters. Like, but other than that, people don't really.
Okay. So this is a slightly backwards question, but there's usually, oh, it's so much harder to make music in Africa and there's lots of obstacles. But what do you feel are the benefits of making music in the African continent?
Since there's not such a, there's not a strong infrastructure of labels and all that, releasing music and working with artists is super easy. There's no like, you know, there's no agents and managers.
It's the Wild West, I'm telling you.
So it's like very little paperwork happens and stuff like that because it's like, it's very natural and people are more focused on getting the music out to the consumers, like, and as opposed to making money off the sale of the music. Because a lot of African music, like, you know, people release it for free because they just want it to go to the market, and you'll make your money off the shows that you do and all that. But primarily, the focus is getting the music out to people. So a lot of collaborations and music really just happens without really any paperwork because people are just going off vibes. But like in scenes that are more developed, like South Africa, it's a different situation. But in Nigeria and East Africa, it's very cool because
it's horizontal. Like there's no celebrity culture in Kenya, so like you can actually approach like the biggest artist in Kenya and be like, hey, can I work with you? You send them your music. They're like really supportive. Like for example, when we started, we couldn't believe that all these artists were actually listening to our music. So when we go out, they're like, hey, are you guys from Earwave? They're like, yeah. They're like, yeah, we really like what you guys are doing. So it's quite natural.
Yes, I can make a song today, release it today. Like that's the benefit to it. And recording studios are plenty and pretty cheap to record. There are a lot of home studios. And there are a lot of amazing session musicians. So like when labels come in now, there's a lot of money that will go to that, paying a lot of money for session musicians and paying a lot of money for all this. But in the meantime, there's a lot of like, people are trying to build the scene to get to a point where we get there. So like in the meantime, everyone's just trying to contribute to the scene and make as much good music as they can for the consumers. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of the benefits that you've got this Wild West approach at the moment, because I think where you do have an established system, it doesn't always work very well. I know, as a manager and someone who works within that system a lot, it's incredibly frustrating. So I always look to Africa going, it must be great, you get to do so many things with so much flexibility. And are you seeing more of a development of kind of, I see more labels establishing now than I used to like 10 years ago when I look for stuff. There are like East African labels with a very niche focus. And do you have managers and publishers and live agents? Is that something that's growing?
Yeah, it's definitely growing because we have a manager who's been managing us for just a couple of months now. But there's a lot of very niche labels that make like music for release on cassette tapes for Japan, like like really weird small labels that make only vinyl releases and stuff like that. But I think recently Universal Music came and signed a deal with Mdundo for releasing some music. So there's labels showing interest. I'm pretty sure Sony at some point will probably make label branch in Kenya and for East African music, because the sales have gone up. There's a lot of money that's being made without labels really being there. So like, especially with people always trying to find new markets, I'm sure that the labels will come. But in the meantime, there's a lot of niche labels that are making music for very interesting markets, for vinyl listeners, for cassette listeners, yeah.
One interesting thing is like in Kenya, like the gospel scene is thriving. Actually, those are the biggest consumers of music, and the way they sell music is purely physical, like in the churches with cassette tapes. And there is this particular road that's famous. It's known as the River Road. So what the artists would do is they go directly to the people who bootleg music, and the bootleggers are the ones who push the music, and they get a small commission out of that. And that has worked really well for them. Then now, the more alternative scene like us, we make most of our revenue from the shows because we've built this really strong niche crowd. And with that crowd now, you're able to like be flexible with the price points and be more outwardly. So like each specific scene has its own way of pushing music. Like reggae and dancehall is pushed through, there is this thing known as matatu. It's like a taxi, 15-seater, and that's what like people used to go around the city, and that's where the people now push their music in those vehicles. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we had forgotten to mention that gospel music is probably the biggest music in Africa. So there's people going, platinum, multi-platinum, like, off gospel music, because people are really devout about their faith there. So like, as usual, like, like gospel music is selling a lot, and there are a lot of people that are making gospel music, which is why there's always this clash between secular and gospel music, because you can't really tiptoe both sides. People don't like you to like release a secular record and then go to gospel. So, but yeah, the gospel artists are really doing well in Africa. Like that's at least that's good. Yeah.
So will we see a gospel wave
Never.
track?
No,
Never.
okay, might be inspirational. I think you just have to be careful about the wording, because once you're a gospel artist, they look at you like this church or a holy figure, so you have to walk that line,
So a lot of these guys, have really restrictive lives, because like they made that gospel song, they made that hit, they're making a lot of money, but now they can't be seen in a bar, they can't, go out. So like I don't think that's for me. But yeah, like it would be really easy for us to make a lot of money just going gospel, but I don't like easy things, and I'm not that religious to begin with, so.
Fair enough. So we've talked a lot, like gospel music is quite an interesting point, because you don't see that quite so much in Europe, at least. But Do you see a lot of music being used as a political statement?
We had elections recently, and a lot of music. A lot of these musicians now, especially when a musician is popular, the politicians will like try and use that song as a catapult, for them to like reach out to the youth, because music's always a way to reach to the young people, and this politicians always trying to reach the young people because we're the biggest, especially in Africa. Like in Kenya, I'd say more than half of the population is 18 to 30. In fact, a lot more than half of the population.
70%.
Yes, I think about 70% of the population is 18 to 30 years old. So, yeah, music's always being used as a tool by politicians to kind of reach the young people. So, yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of music activists, there is Octopizzo, then there is Heart the Band. What was the other big band? These guys who do the what's the name? The one with Mandela. Sarabi, yeah, Sarabi is also like one of these politically charged bands, and yeah, we have a few of that, but mostly the stance that musicians take is probably through social media, because one thing about the politics in Kenya is you can't pick a side, because if you pick a side, then you alienate one side completely, and the way our country is set is the sides are split based on our ethnicities, so you don't want to do that because you're making music for everyone. Yeah.
So it's not nuanced. It's not about debate and like who has the best policy. It's really about people vote on ethnicity. So like it's kind of pointless to make your music political, because people don't have necessarily political beliefs. They have their ethnical foundation. So it's like I'll vote for somebody who's like me, and a lot of regions are grouped into like ethnicities, like people live on this side, it's mostly people from here, and it's mostly people from there. So a lot of music people don't really try and put anything to do with politics in that, because once you mix that, you'll make a lot of people angry, which is really not what you're trying to do with your music.
But you were saying you interned at the UN, so did you see differences in musical culture because you were based in New York?
Yeah, like it was very different. It was like a culture shock, especially coming from Kenya. I'd like to go to New York and see the scene there. But it was really fun because I got to go to a lot of nightclubs and a lot of places that I kind of got the vibe of the scene there. And I met a couple of musicians there, so it's always interesting to like be able to like meet people from another country and just see what they place value on in terms of like the music and the culture. So it was really fun working there. Then I think later on I got to work with Willow Smith on a song. So it was really fun.
Play the song, please.
The song's called Get Lost. It's featuring Willow Smith and Jabs. They're part of a collective called Misfits Rep.
I've got 2 tattoos, and I know love splits a person in 2. We've been cruising in your Jeep, and it just puts me right to sleep. We argue, I'm not in the mood. I've got a mouth and an attitude. It's true, I love you. We stop for gas, I'm feeling tight. We take the 10, I'm home by 9. I'm home by 9. We stop for gas, I'm feeling tight. We take the 10, I'm home by 9. I'm home by 9. We stop for gas, I'm feeling tight. I blow some Mosa and he just drives.
Yeah, so that's a little preview of that song.
So other than you guys, who else should we be listening to? Not just from Kenya, but like I know you guys work a lot with the whole of kind of the East African scene.
I'd say a lot of people you need to listen to is there's Suraj, makes house music. There's Mr. Lou.
Yeah, actually, Nairobi has like now different collectives. So you have Suraj, then you have this collective known as Expresso, with like 5 producers, crazy. Then
Kamula.
Kamula. Let's see, in Uganda there. Let me just remember. There's also a collective in Tanzania. What's the name? What's his name? Brian Simba. Yes, Brian Simba. Then in Uganda you have this person known as, oh my God.
It's really like this. Usually you go blank when you ask these questions, but we'll share like
Let's say, let's make a SoundCloud
Yes,
playlist.
Actually, we'll make a SoundCloud playlist. Yeah.
and I think maybe through the website or
Absolutely.
the
Well, I mean,
Instagram.
all of these videos are going to be on YouTube.
Yeah.
So we'll add a link to your SoundCloud playlist.
Yeah, awesome.
So now I'm going to open it up to the room. Does anyone have any questions? I can always rely on you. You're amazing.
Hi. What's the pros and cons with by working with collective? What's the pros and cons?
Lots of arguments, actually. Because we imagine you're just 6 people, and these are 6 people who have a completely different approach to yours. Yeah. So for us, normally, their hard part is like the starting point. Like, where do we start? Someone would be like, no, let's start with this. Let's start with this. So there's a bit of that back and forth before we reach like what we want. Yeah.
But we were all friends, so it's as long as you can argue with your friends, but you're not going to like hate each other forever. So like you can shout at each other and be smiling the next moment. So I think the pros for us were essentially, I'm a graphic designer. I make videos. I'm a photographer too. He's a graphic designer. So we all have different skills so that we help each other. So if some of my other friends aren't graphic designers within the collective, I make their artwork. I take their photos, I do their videos. So I think there's a lot of give and exchange, like with skills. Like I've just started to learn how to like mix and master, but he's done it for longer than me. So I get tips from him, and other people within the collective, like my friend plays guitar and all that. So like there's a lot of skills that you and even equipment that you can share with each other. So it's a lot easier than me having to get all the equipment myself, because I'm a solo artist, So
you can just split the costs as all 5, and then we just now share everything within the
and
collective.
like we can be like 6 places at once if we need to do
shows. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we
can split the group. Very
and
easily.
also like even with interviews, like we can 6 of us, like with 6 of us, we can all be at 6 different radio stations, giving an interview on a show or whatever it is. So it's a lot easier navigating like a lot of these problems with.
And the good thing is we have like a veto system. So like if one person doesn't agree, then all of us don't agree. So that's the way we keep united, is that we only make a decision when it's unanimous among all of us. Yeah. So that way like everybody feels that it's fair for them.
Yeah, as opposed to democracy, because like a lot of people, if 4 of you agree and 2 people don't, you really don't do anything where other people don't want to do it, because the energy won't be there. So it's everything that we do has to be like unanimous decision, so that everyone's happy at all times. It takes a lot longer for things to get done, but when they do get done, like
longer.
Yeah, I mean 6 people doing one thing makes anything better if you all enter in it without any ego.
I have a follow-up. Can I?
Yes.
So I can imagine that you had to work with your ego, like to decrease your ego. How did you do that? How did you like? Did you do some meditation or?
Actually, it's just not meditation. I think not having your ego is a mindset thing. Like the thing is, you don't have to think that you're better than someone, because, like personally, like I've had the most experience, but I've learned a lot from them. So just that way I was just like, let me just enter this, not coming like I'm the lead or whatever. So even the whole structure of the collective is very horizontal. So each person plays an important role, and each person's choice means something.
Yeah, and I loved all their music before I met them. So like it's really easy to be egoless when you look up to the people that are around you, as opposed to thinking that you're better than anyone. So it's super easy to get into a room with your friends and not think I'm better at this or I'm better at that. It's always a lot easier, and a lot easier to get work done when you come in with the mindset that I've come here to learn and I've come here to give and to receive. So it's effective if you remove your ego from it. I generally I'm not driven by my ego. I think it's just really important to always respect the people around you. If you respect the people around you, your
They
ego really
respect you
won't come
also.
into play.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
I have a question. What responsibility do the artists here in Western world have when they take inspiration from Africa? Because I know I'll go to the clubs a lot and I hear reggaeton, dancehall, asonto, Afrobeats, and I see different Swedish artists that's starting to take some of the sounds from there, but sometimes people don't know the styles come from Africa or come from the African Caribbean movements and styles. So what kind of responsibilities do we
I think just honor the source. Like if you know it's from Africa, just like say this is what inspired you, or this is what you're pulling from. Because you know the whole thing is cultural appropriation is taking something and owning it as yours. You know, so as long as you honor where it came from, then yeah, come on, make Afrobeat, man. Let's push this sound. You
Yeah,
know?
because it's essentially just respecting where it came from and being able to like, I know you don't need to have a banner saying like this is from Africa, but like if somebody asks you and if you genuinely listen to African music, share it with your friends. Tell people like, oh, this is from this artist or from that artist, because I think it's important. Like even with music history, people don't realize that a lot of music comes from Africa. Hip hop, the origins of hip hop come from Africa because the rhythms and the drum beats and all that are things that were taken by the slaves that were taken out to America and all this. So like a lot of music comes from Africa. It's just that people don't really know that. So as long as you educate your friends, it doesn't need to even be that deep. Just say like if you listen to Wizkid, if you listen to Davido, whichever African artist you listen to, just like tell your friends about it and just let people know that the music's from Africa. It's as simple as that, because we get influences from European artists too, and I share all the music that I listen to with my friends. So like, it doesn't even. I know it's really hard because like people can really be very sensitive about that, about their different cultures and the appropriation. But I think it just comes down to, do you actually respect and honor and like where the influence came from, or are you trying to hide it and pass it off as something new? Because like I don't think very few things are new. It's just like your version of it. So just make sure that you let people know that you got your inspirations from Africa or from this artist or that artist.
I'm going to jump in with another question. We didn't really talk about it much, but as you were saying, you know, you're both graphic designers, you're a photographer. Do you think that helps your overall creative process? Does it make better music in the end?
Actually, personally, for me, they're more separate. But I think it's made me more patient. Like doing graphic design is a very patient job. Like back and forth with the client and fixing small things and be paying attention to detail. So just that workflow from my graphic design sipped into like how I make my music. So if a musician is like, oh, I don't like how you did my vocals or anything, I want to be like, damn, she's saying I don't produce so well. It'll be like, okay, yeah, let's refine this thing till we were both happy. Yeah.
And I think a lot of like with music, I can make everything myself, but if you're doing videos, you can't really, it's really hard to be able to do everything yourself. So it fosters the ability to be able to collaborate with people and have a lot of opinions on what you're doing, which is like, you know, with photography, you have a lighting assistant, you have all this. So, it's helped me a lot because sometimes I've made songs based on photos I've taken. Like it gives me the push or the drive, like it gives me a vibe. or like I've done something in reverse. Like I've thought of an idea of a video, and I make the song in reverse to be like, that would be a cool video. What would be the soundtrack to a video like that? So yeah, it really has influenced like my music.
Any more questions? Right, do you guys want to end with a song?
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay, let me just switch this on. This is a more ambient song, and like this is like one of my latest projects.
The internet clearly is not as good as Nairobi. Sorry, dude. We'll give it another try.
I'm just testing you. I'm just testing Cause I've been craving that holy water. I've been craving that holy water. I've been craving that holy water. I've been craving, craving, craving. I wasn't made to give up or give no fucks. I was just born to touch the rust on your soul with my sweet fairy dust. I could heal your trust, but you know that I must keep my feet on the road. So I'ma teach you on. I've been walking since dawn. Only company I got with me is this song. So long, honey, babe. Where I'm bound, I don't know how much to say. Hey, I don't wanna wait a night for it. Feel that fire in the distance, I'ma fight for it. And you best believe I'm here to give my life for it. Manifest my destiny, cause I am right for it. Bitch, if you want about the drama, karma coming to you. Everybody got a vision, but how many come through? Do you wanna die out in the desert looking for food? Or let your thirst lead you deeper to the lotus root? The tides of time and light.
Wow, that was pretty inspirational.
Thank
you so much, guys. We've really enjoyed hearing a lot about Kenya today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.